My son didn't speak, not when his wife forged my signature, twice, not when she gutted my house and called it hers. But when the judge ruled I owned everything, Kayla shrieked, "You stole our life!" I didn't flinch. I raised the man you married. That was my first mistake. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. I was still wearing my retreat wristband when I turned onto Maple Hollow Drive and saw my life dumped on the lawn like a garage sale no one wanted to run. Suitcases. Boxes. My cedar chest cracked at the hinge. A stack of framed photos resting crooked against the mailbox post. The glass fogged from the dew. My rocking chair leaned against a garden bed I'd planted myself the year Brent and Kayla moved in. At first, I thought, a break-in, or worse, a fire. But the house looked untouched, windows shut, door closed, porch lights off despite the dusk settling in. Then I saw the sticky note. We needed the space. You were gone. Kay. That was when my chest went cold. The key fob didn't work. The door I'd helped pick out, with the stained glass panel and antique brass handle, stayed locked. I rang the bell once, then again. I didn't knock. I wouldn't beg. Eventually, Kayla opened the door in her cropped hoodie and socked feet, eyes glossed with faux innocence. "Oh," she said flatly, "you're back early." "It's Sunday," I said. She blinked. "Right. You left Friday. Just figured you were extending the trip." I looked past her, into the hallway I'd mopped every week, where my coat used to hang. "Why is my chest on the lawn?" "We rearranged," she said, folding her arms. "You haven't been using the space. Brent said it was fine." I didn't ask why. I didn't have to. Brent appeared behind her in the hallway, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets. He didn't speak, just stared somewhere near my shoulder like it pained him to make eye contact. "I'll be back for my things," I said. Kayla shrugged. "We'll try not to get them wet." I turned, jaw tight, pulse louder than the crickets chirping along the porch rail. As I walked back to my car, an old Buick I'd kept maintained like my marriage once was, I glanced up. Rhea. She stood in the second-floor window, partially hidden by a sheer curtain. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. At Carla's house that night, I didn't cry. Not once. I let her pour me a glass of boxed Merlot, and we sat on her tiny, floral love seat, Reruns of Murder, she wrote playing in the background. The silence was thick, but not heavy. Carla didn't ask questions. She'd seen enough in her 60 years to know when to let pain unspool on its own. "You can stay as long as you want," she said, passing me a quilt. "I won't need long," I said. The next morning, a manila envelope was waiting for me on the kitchen table. Carla must have fished it from the pile of things I'd stacked in her foyer. My name was written in perfect courier type across the center. I opened it slowly, wary of something that felt too formal to be personal. Inside were mortgage documents, refinancing paperwork, fixed-rate terms. My signature, shaky but unmistakable, scrawled across 3 pages. But I hadn't signed anything in over 6 months. I scanned faster, heart pounding now, stomach tight. Cosigner, Lorraine M. Baxter. Property address, 417 Maple Hollow Drive. Borrower, Brent Baxter. Co-borrower, Kayla Baxter. Date of signing, 4 weeks ago. I stared at the bottom of the page, where my initials were inked in 3 corners, each one smaller than the last. Like they were hoping I wouldn't notice them disappearing. I didn't know if I was more shocked by the forgery or the fact that I'd somehow expected it. Deep down, I think I always knew Kayla's ambition didn't stop at social media sponsorships and yoga leggings. She wanted real estate, and she'd just used my name to buy it. I set the papers down carefully, then looked across the room at Carla, who was buttering toast without saying a word. She met my eyes, and I said the only thing that came to me, steady and low. "Call your legal aid contact, because this wasn't about property. This was about war. And they'd just fired the first shot. By 8:12 a.m., Carla was already on the phone. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just punched in the number of an old colleague at the county clerk's office, her tone all business. "I need you to verify a deed transfer and a co-signature. Lorraine Baxter." Yes, that Lorraine. I stood behind her, arms crossed, staring out at her overgrown backyard, every blade of grass suddenly more trustworthy than my own family. A click. A pause. Carla turned, phone slightly lowered. "Lori, you didn't just co-sign, you're on the title." My fingers went cold. "What percentage?" She waited. 49%, right below Brent and Kayla. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. Well, at least they didn't give me the majority. 10 minutes. Later, a PDF hit Carla's inbox. It had all the details. Appraisal date, closing agent, digital initials, and yes, there it was again, my name on the mortgage. Same signature, same ink, dated exactly 4 weeks ago. I hadn't signed a thing, but it didn't matter now. Paper made lies permanent. By noon, Brent finally returned my call. His voice cracked with that same hesitant tremble he used in high school when he dented my Buick and tried to blame the mailbox. "Mom, I know it looks bad, but it was just paperwork. Temporary. We were trying to lock in a better rate. You forged my name." "It wasn't forged," he rushed. "It was suggested. The broker said if a co-owner with strong credit came on, we'd qualify for a lower interest bracket. Kayla filled it out. I thought you knew." "You thought I knew you leveraged my retirement credit score for a discount on a house I already paid half the down payment for?" Silence. "Temporary," he repeated weakly. The call ended without goodbye. That evening, Rhea texted. Just one line. "Mom's planning to turn your room into a wellness content studio. Ring light and everything." She followed it with a sideways face emoji, which didn't even begin to mask the edge I felt in those words. It was never just about space, it was about erasure. Removing the smell of my perfume from the linens, my soup pots from the cabinets, my presence from the walls. I called the HOA the next morning. Reggie Tully answered, nasal and distracted. "Maple Hollow, Unit 417, I said. "This is Lorraine Baxter, co-owner." His tone changed instantly. "Yes, Ms. Baxter. What can I help you with? Can you confirm that exterior structural changes require both title holders' consent?" "Absolutely," he said. "It's in the covenant." "Why?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Because my daughter-in-law didn't ask, and I didn't sign, so you'll be getting a formal notice from me shortly." I hung up, dialed the next number before the dial tone could even end. "Deborah Lyles," the voice answered, warm and familiar. "Deb," I said, "it's Lori. I need to talk real estate." A beat, then laughter. "This about that son of yours?" "No," I said, eyes scanning the mortgage printout still lying on Carla's table. "This is about the woman he married." As I ended the call, Carla walked in with 2 mugs and an eyebrow raised. "So?" she asked. I lifted my cup. "They wanted a better rate. Let's see how they like a higher price." Because once you put my name on the deed, whether I agreed to it or not, you didn't just involve me. You gave me power, and I'd just decided to use it. By Tuesday morning, Carla had printed the full title certificate and spread it across her kitchen counter like a war map. Her fingers tapped once, right on the legal line that said, "Ownership distribution, L. Baxter, 48%. "Not 49?" I asked. She shrugged. "Probably so Kayla could keep majority vote with Brent. Doesn't matter. You're still a legal gatekeeper. Any structural or zoning modifications? They need your signature." I leaned over the paper, tracing the font with my fingernail. "Then she's already in violation." "Multiple," Carla said. "She knocked down that back closet wall without filing. That's listed as a permanent fixture on the original floor plan." We looked at each other. I reached for my phone. Reggie answered after 2 rings, his voice clipped but curious. "I'm calling about an unauthorized renovation," I said. 417 Maple Hollow. The second upstairs bedroom now has a drywall frame sticking out into the hallway. No permits, no second-party authorization." There was a pause, then the shuffle of paperwork. "You're on title?" he asked. 48%, I replied, "and I'd like an immediate freeze on all alterations." His tone changed, professional, suddenly polite. "Understood. I'll file the violation form today and send a notice. Nothing moves forward without your written consent." "Thank you, Mr. Tully." "Happy to help," he said. Frankly, I've been waiting for someone in that house to read the rules. By noon, I was watching Kayla's reaction unfold online. She went live on Instagram under the caption, "Toxic Elders Unmasked." "Some of us are just trying to build a safe creative space," she said, seated on a velvet floor cushion, eyes glossed for effect. "But toxic relatives want to control everything, like they haven't already had their turn at life." Thousands watched. Some cheered. Others asked if she was talking about me. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Brent called that evening, his voice tight. "Mom, can you please not escalate this?" I said nothing. "She's under a lot of pressure right now. She's lost sponsors. She thinks you're trying to humiliate her." "I haven't even started," I said. Brent sighed. "Please don't cause a scene." I felt something harden inside me, something sharp and old. "Oh, sweetheart," I said quietly. "You already did." That night, I moved officially into Carla's guest house. It smelled like cedar, planks and old perfume, and the twin bed groaned under my hips when I sat. Still, I slept for the first time in 3 days without waking once. The next morning, while Kayla was busy lighting sage for her TikTok followers and pretending to manifest peace, I met Deborah at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She wore a red coat and gold-rimmed glasses, and she already had a folder open before I even ordered my drink. "We can list it," she said. "You have title rights, and if the bank investigation goes in your favor, you'll have standing to trigger a forced sale." "I want quiet," I said. "No drama, no headlines." Deborah nodded. "Then we prep it carefully. Clean the listing history, stage it neutral, let the offers do the shouting." She slid a draft listing sheet across the table. At the top, under seller name, she'd written, "Lorraine M. Baxter, title co-owner." I took it in, then looked out the window where a new sun was climbing. They thought they threw me out. They forgot I'm still on the deed. And I wasn't just coming back, I was bringing the market with me. The next move wasn't loud. It was documented. By Thursday morning, Reggie Tully had a manila folder full of violations, all tied neatly to Unit 417. Unauthorized drywall removal, dumpster placement without permit, improper signage for a commercial shoot. It read like a slow-motion heist in reverse. Not what Kayla stole, but what she tried to build on ground that was never hers. I stopped by his office in the HOA building just after lunch. He looked up as I entered, gave a half smile like he'd been waiting for me. "She didn't pull a single form," he said, sliding the file across the table. "Frankly, we could find them $5,000 just on this." "Hold off," I said. "For now." He nodded. "Still, it's nice seeing someone read the bylaws." That afternoon, I pulled out the digital recorder Carla had given me last Christmas. I'd never used it, thought it was too old school for someone who managed her finances online. But it worked beautifully. I clipped it to the inside of my cardigan and pressed record each time I stepped near the house. Kayla didn't disappoint. "You're just mad because no one needs your casseroles anymore. You're lucky Brent has a soft spot for strays. This house deserves someone modern." Each jab landed softer now, like trying to bruise granite. Still, I cataloged them all, just in case. Then, the real crack appeared. One Rhea delivered quietly, via a message she deleted 5 minutes later. A screenshot, a group chat, her mom and 2 influencer friends. "She's stubborn but old. We'll push her out for good this time." Underneath it, a picture of my room, already cleared. The caption? "Studio vibes incoming." I stared at the screen a long time before saving it to a hidden folder. Then I called Deborah. We finalized the listing. Quietly, discreetly. No public MLS, just private showings and whispers among cash-ready buyers. "Market's still hot," she told me, tapping her stylus against her tablet. "Mid-century with modern updates in this zip code? You'll have a bid within days." "Let it happen," I said. "No signs, no noise." She understood. The open house invite went out digitally to her private list Friday morning. 10 prospective buyers, staggered, vetted, discreet. By 2 p.m., Kayla had found it. Her scream could have cracked drywall. "What the hell is this?" she yelled, waving her phone at Brent like it had personally betrayed her. "She's selling the house?" Brent's voice didn't carry, but I could imagine it. Small. Weak. A shrug where a backbone should have been. I stood across the street in Carla's driveway, holding my mug and watching it all unfold behind tinted glass. Brent stepped outside minutes later, phone to his ear. It was me he called, of course. "You're really doing this?" he said. "I'm just following the rules," I said evenly, "same ones your wife didn't bother reading." "She's panicking." "She should be." Silence stretched thin between us. "She says you're ruining her life." I smiled to myself. "Tell her," I said, voice low and calm. "She wanted space." Then I hung up, walked back into the house, and whispered to Carla, "Now I'll give her a whole new zip code." Because once I decided to exit, I wouldn't just slip away quietly. I'd make sure the echo stayed. The smell hit Deborah the moment she unlocked the front door. "Vanilla soy candle and eucalyptus mist," she muttered, fanning the air. "She's staging for Instagram, not actual buyers." Kayla had struck first. Sometime between Wednesday's listing and Friday's open house, she'd marched back into the property and redressed it in the style of someone desperate to be seen. Gone were the muted tones and clean lines Deborah and I had agreed on. In their place stood neon throw pillows, faux fur rugs, and an aggressively large ring light stationed like a sentry in the middle of the living room. She'd even swapped out the family photos I'd left on the mantel, me and Brent at his high school. Graduation, Ria's third birthday in the backyard, for generic framed prints of beach quotes and latte foam art. The dining room table was set with iridescent plates and pink plastic wine glasses. It looked like a showroom for people who had never actually owned a home. "She thinks this'll help?" I asked, stepping through the front entry with measured calm. "She thinks this house is hers," Deborah said, tight-lipped. I nodded once and started unscrewing the wall-mounted LED sign that read, "Grind now, shine later." That night, long after Kayla left to go shoot content downtown, Carla and I moved through each room in soft, deliberate silence. We returned everything to what it had been. Deborah had brought back the antique mirror from my old hallway. I rehung the quilt I'd made during my second year of marriage. I placed the framed photos back with care, wiped each glass edge clean with a soft cloth. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was about honesty. Let the house breathe in its own skin. The next morning, the first buyer arrived at 10:06 a.m., holding a coffee and walking like someone who could afford not to waste time. Deborah greeted her at the door with poise and clarity, pointing out the bay windows, the updated fixtures, the original hardwood still intact beneath the rugs. The woman, a pediatrician from Lexington, ran her hand across the kitchen island like it had just whispered to her. Deborah gestured toward the hallway. Lorraine Baxter, the co-owner, kept this home up even when the others stopped caring. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. I remained seated quietly in the breakfast nook for most of the walkthroughs, just present enough to be noticed, not enough to distract. Some buyers asked who I was, some didn't. Either way, the offer cards began to stack neatly in Deborah's folder. Just after 2, Brent showed up. He didn't knock, just walked in like the floor still remembered him. His hair was uncombed and he looked like he hadn't slept. He waited until Deborah and the last buyer stepped out back to view the garden before approaching me in the hallway. "Are you really doing this?" he asked, voice low, almost childlike. I turned toward him slowly. "You let her do it to me first." His mouth parted like he might argue, but nothing came out. Instead, he looked down at his shoes, jaw clenching. I thought I saw regret flicker somewhere in his posture, but I didn't have time to coddle it. "I didn't want to choose sides," he muttered. "You didn't," I said. "You just stood in the doorway while she picked the lock." He left without another word. By sunset, the pediatrician had submitted a full cash offer, clean, no contingencies, above asking. Deborah placed the final sheet in front of me. "It's yours to sign." I read every line, every clause. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew now what it cost to not pay attention. Then I signed it. The pen didn't shake. Later, as the golden hour light filtered through the front windows, casting shadows on the now restored living room, I stood near the fireplace one last time. The house was no longer mine, but it had told its truth, and that truth had found a buyer. The offer was signed. The house was halfway out of my hands. Then the second mortgage surfaced. It came in quietly, a flagged notice sent to Deborah by the title insurance agent during the standard escrow review. Buried beneath boilerplate language was a newly recorded lien, filed under my name and Brent's, dated just 2 weeks earlier. Another loan. A different lender, a separate signature. Mine. Only I hadn't signed it. I sat at Carla's dining table, every page of the document printed and spread before me like a crime scene. Deborah hovered beside me with her reading glasses pushed down to the tip of her nose, scanning line by line. "Same handwriting," I muttered, narrowing my eyes at the looping cursive. "But not the same hand." "They lifted it," Deborah said. "From the first loan. This is a copy-paste job on real paper." I stared down at the Lorraine M. Baxter slanted across the borrower's signature line. It looked right. It even looked like me. But it wasn't mine. Carla didn't waste a beat. She walked to the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and made a call I'd only heard her reference once. Her old friend Russell from Legal Aid, the one who owed her a favor from the foreclosure workshops they ran back in 2012. "Russ," she said, her tone clipped and urgent, "we've got fraud. Title loan, escrow hold. We need a document examiner and a fraud hold filed before this gets buried." Within 3 hours, the loan company issued a freeze. They would not proceed until the origin of the signature was verified. The buyer was notified. She was patient, for now. But I knew that patience came with a shelf life, and that's when Kayla struck back. A certified envelope arrived on Carla's porch Saturday morning, addressed to the HOA board and the escrow officer. Inside was a notarized statement from Kayla, claiming that I, her mother-in-law, was suffering from progressive memory decline, was easily confused, and had a long-standing history of signing documents without comprehension. She was attempting to have me declared mentally unfit, to nullify the house sale, and to claim durable financial power of attorney. Carla read it aloud, then let the papers fall to the table. "She's not just desperate," she said, voice low. "She's dangerous." Later that night, Rhea called me from the backyard in hushed tones. She sounded scared, even as she tried to keep her voice steady. "I overheard her, Nana," she said. She told her friend on speakerphone, "It won't matter. She won't last the month anyway." I closed my eyes and inhaled. Not from grief, not even from shock, from calculation. That night, I went to the family clinic and requested a full cognitive assessment, a memory evaluation, and a physical from top to bottom. My primary physician, Dr. Helen Monroe, ran the tests herself and printed the results with a dry smile. "Still sharp as a tack," she said, tapping the papers. "BP, cholesterol, reflexes, better than mine." I filed the report inside a folder labeled, "In the event of stupidity." The next morning, I met Reggie on his lunch break outside the HOA building. He handed me a flash drive. "She forgot to change her privacy settings," he said. "Half her followers are public, so are her comments about you being a liability." The flash drive held screenshots, full reels, and clips of Kayla joking about old people who don't know what a ring light is, and how the only thing my mother-in-law stages is a pity party. "She used HOA Wi-Fi for half of this," Reggie added. "She thinks she's clever, but your name's still on the router." Back at Carla's, I watched each clip with the volume low and the screen bright. I cataloged every insult, every slip, every self-incriminating caption she'd posted in the haze of arrogance and aesthetic lighting. Then I picked up the fraud folder, placed the drive on top, and slid them both into a zippered case. This wasn't personal anymore. It was procedural. Because if she wanted to play games in escrow, I was done playing fair. I was going for the kill. The courthouse smelled like industrial carpet and anxious breath. I wore navy. No brooch, no flashy earrings, just a plain sheath dress, a matching cardigan, and the same low heels I wore to Brent's graduation all those years ago, before everything curdled. Carla walked beside me in a charcoal pantsuit she hadn't worn since her last consulting deposition. She said I looked uncourtably credible. I took it as a compliment. Kayla arrived flanked by her attorney and 2 women I assumed were image consultants. She wore a soft gray wrap dress, minimal makeup, and a walking cane I had never seen her use. It was all theater, and not particularly good theater at that. Brent wasn't with her. The courtroom was small, quiet. A probate judge with kind eyes and an efficient manner sat at the bench, reading the preliminary case summary with practiced neutrality. When he looked up, his gaze flicked from me to Kayla, then down again at the folder in front of him. "Ms. Baxter," he said, addressing Kayla first, "you've submitted a petition challenging the mental competence of Mrs. Lorraine Baxter and contesting her authority in the pending sale of 417 Maple Hollow Drive. Is that still your position?" Kayla nodded carefully. "Yes, Your Honor. I was the sole caregiver. My mother-in-law has been under significant stress. She's become forgetful, erratic. She signed documents she didn't understand. I was simply trying to protect her from herself." Her voice cracked near the end, well-timed and hollow. Her lawyer handed her a tissue she didn't use. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Baxter?" I stood slowly. "I'd like to submit the following," I said, my voice calm but clear. Deborah, seated 2 rows back, rose and handed over the packet. Inside, certified cognitive results, notarized copies of the fraudulent loan documents, a signature analysis from Russell's expert, and a USB with the footage Reggie had pulled from Kayla's social media. "I'd also like the court to hear from someone else," I added. Rhea stood. She looked younger than usual that day. Less eyeliner, hair neatly brushed back, a plain blue dress that almost made her look like a schoolgirl again, but her voice held steel. "My mom bullied my Nana," she said. "She made fun of her. She told people online she was a burden. She said—" Rhea paused, swallowing. "She said Nana wouldn't last the month. That's not protecting someone. That's waiting for them to disappear." Kayla paled. Her attorney leaned in, whispering furiously. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ms. Baxter." He reviewed the documents again. His fingers tapped once, then twice against the bench. "This court finds no evidence of diminished capacity in Mrs. Lorraine Baxter," he said finally. "The cognitive assessment confirms competence. The documents presented support. A reasonable allegation of fraud. I find the charges worthy of pursuit." Kayla turned in her seat, panic rising like heat off pavement. The judge continued. "Further, given the revised findings, the court hereby unfreezes the sale of 417 Maple Hollow Drive. Escrow may proceed, with Mrs. Baxter as the sole qualifying title holder." A small sound escaped Kayla, half gasp, half growl. Court adjourned with the gavel's soft thud. I turned to gather my bag, my papers, my calm. Outside, the news hadn't yet spread, but Kayla was already unraveling. On the steps of the courthouse, in front of half a dozen onlookers, she spun toward me, face red, voice raw. "You stole our life," she shouted. I looked her in the eye. My voice didn't rise. "I gave you a life," I said. "You wasted it." Carla touched my elbow gently. I didn't look back as we walked down the courthouse stairs. I didn't need to. The echo of the judge's ruling, of Rhea's voice, of Kayla's scream, none of it chased me. But I did stop at the final step, tilting my face to the sun. Because I knew it wasn't over. She'd lost the house, but she still had teeth. And animals bite hardest when they're cornered. The envelope arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning, white, thick, official. Inside, a formal eviction notice. Recipient, Brent and Kayla Baxter. Effective immediately upon escrow clearance. By noon, the paperwork was hand-delivered to the front door of 417 Maple Hollow by a man in a blazer and mirrored sunglasses who didn't flinch when Kayla screamed. "You can't just kick us out!" she shouted from the porch, barefoot and livid, waving the notice like it might catch fire in her hands. "We live here. This is our home." The man didn't argue. He just pointed to the signature on the bottom, Lorraine M. Baxter, title holder. Then he walked away. 2 days later, Kayla's tantrum turned tactical. I received a call from Reggie at 9:03 a.m. sharp. "Ms. Baxter," he said, "I regret to inform you there's been property damage." Kayla, in a final, furious flourish, had shattered a stained glass window I'd salvaged from my grandmother's old chapel in Illinois. She spray-painted one of the front shutters, number Free the Wife, and ripped a cabinet door clean off its hinges. In the master bathroom, she smashed the antique vanity mirror and poured pink glitter down the sink drains. She live-streamed the whole thing, Reggie said, sighing. I'm fining her $8,000 in HOA violations. Half for the vandalism, half for filming a meltdown on community property. I thanked him, hung up, and made a call of my own. By dusk, 2 private security officers stood posted on the front lawn, courtesy of a firm Deborah had used during a messy estate handover 2 years ago. They were discreet but firm. No entry allowed without written authorization from me. When Kayla tried to return that night, sobbing theatrically for the cameras she thought were still watching, she was denied at the gate. She left claw marks on the driver's side door of her own car. The following morning, Rhea called me. Her voice was small, but it held no indecision. I don't want to live with her anymore, she said. Can I come stay with you? My breath caught, but not from surprise. Yes, I said gently. Always. Carla, who was folding laundry nearby, smiled over her shoulder. We'll make up the spare room. Later that night, while Carla taught Rhea how to roast vegetables without setting off the smoke alarm, I sat on her sun porch with a glass of iced tea and my laptop open to escrow notifications. The wire cleared, $478,000. Clean, whole, final. No debts, no liens, just the kind of money that gives you back your spine. I sat there for a while, staring at the screen. Then I closed the laptop and watched the porch light flicker against the breeze like a small, defiant flame. The next day, Kayla's carefully curated influencer facade began to unravel in real time. Posts vanished. Her comment sections exploded. Didn't you steal that house? Is that why you're living out of your mom's guest room? House of lies. Brands pulled sponsorships. Followers dropped by the hundreds. Screenshots of her tantrum at the HOA went viral. She posted a tearful video claiming victimhood. No one believed it. Brent, at least, had the sense not to make excuses. He showed up on Carla's porch that evening with a paper bag of groceries and a face that looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen it. I'm sorry, he said. I should have stepped in. I let it happen. You let her do it, I said. Then you watched her do it again. He nodded. I never wanted to choose. You didn't, I replied, and that was the choice. He left the groceries on the porch and walked away. Inside the bag was a note, scrawled in his shaky handwriting. I hope this helps. I know it doesn't fix anything. It didn't, but I took the eggs inside anyway. And tomorrow I'd make breakfast for my granddaughter in a house no one could take from me again, because the house wasn't the only thing I reclaimed. I'd taken back the silence, and now I intended to fill it with voices that knew what it meant to be heard. The pen didn't feel heavy when I signed the updated will. It felt like air, decisive, cold, and necessary. Across the mahogany desk, the estate attorney, a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s with precise handwriting and a tone like a judge's gavel, watched as I initialed the last page. Her office was quiet, almost sterile, filled with neutral artwork and a faint scent of citrus cleaner, the kind of place where no one pretended decisions didn't come with consequence. So, to confirm, she said, tapping the final clause, you're naming your granddaughter, Rhea Baxter, as primary heir to all assets, liquid and fixed, under both the revised trust and will. No secondary heir, no split shares, no contest clause applied. I nodded without hesitation. Correct. I'd also like that notarized letter confirming removal of my son delivered by week's end. She tilted her head slightly. That's a permanent exclusion, no reinstatement provision. That's the point, I said. The letter to Brent would be brief and formal, just 3 paragraphs outlining his removal from the estate, citing misuse of my name in financial matters and dereliction of duty as justification. It wouldn't be vindictive. It would be final. Back at Carla's house that afternoon, Rhea returned home from her second shift at the nonprofit with dust on her jeans and a smile I hadn't seen since before her mother turned the upstairs into a battleground. Sorting donation bins is more complicated than it looks, she said, dropping her bag near the kitchen island. But Carla says I've got a good eye for what's salvageable. She's right, I said, handing her a glass of lemonade. You always did know what was worth keeping." We sat in easy silence while the sun dipped lower through the kitchen window, the soft clink of ice the only sound between us. I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye and thought, not for the first time, that maybe blood didn't always pass down legacy. Sometimes it skipped a generation just to find someone strong enough to carry it. The next day, Carla called me into her office with that familiar raised eyebrow that meant trouble. "Take a look at this," she said, rotating her laptop toward me. Kayla had launched a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Starting Over After Elder Abuse, Please Help Us Rebuild." The page was filled with doctored photos, overdramatic claims, and a selfie of her in sunglasses, looking broken on someone's guest room floor. "They're trying to crowdsource guilt," Carla said, disgust coloring her voice, but 2 users already reported her for fraud. Sure enough, by nightfall, the page was suspended for pending verification. Her followers were vanishing too. One had commented, "Didn't you try to evict the woman you stole from?" Another wrote, "Karma always shows up late, but it shows up loud." By Friday, I decided to host a small dinner to thank the 3 people who had helped me survive the past few months without asking for anything in return. Deborah brought shrimp pasta and 2 bottles of wine. Reggie came in his usual windbreaker, arms full of firewood. Carla insisted on setting the table with her good dishes, even though I told her we didn't need anything fancy. We ate on the back patio of my condo, under string lights we'd strung across the pergola ourselves. The air was warm and thick with honeysuckle, and for once nobody brought up Kayla or court filings or escrow disputes. "To clean exits," Deborah toasted, raising her glass, "and cleaner beginnings." "To the woman who took back her deed, and her dignity," Reggie added. Carla leaned in and smiled. "To Lori. From co-signer to queen." I laughed. Quiet, full, and free. The celebration was still humming when the doorbell rang around 9. 3 soft chimes. No rush, no pounding. I opened the door slowly, unsure of who'd be standing on the other side. It was Brent. No groceries this time. No wife trailing behind. Just him, standing there in a faded jacket, hair slightly too long, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "I didn't know where else to go," he said, voice hushed, eyes flicking past my shoulder like he hoped not to be turned away. I didn't move, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't feel anything I was supposed to feel. Not anger, not relief, just the quiet confirmation that some doors, once closed, don't swing open the same way again. Behind me, I heard the soft clatter of dishes, the hum of voices that sounded like home. I opened the door just enough to let the light spill out. Then I said, carefully, "I guess we'll see if you know how to earn your way back," because forgiveness wasn't cheap, and I no longer gave it out on credit. Brent stepped into the condo like a man walking barefoot across broken glass. He paused just inside the threshold, eyes darting to the string lights overhead, the worn rug beneath his feet, the soft scent of rosemary and lemon wafting from the kitchen. He looked like he wanted to ask if something had changed, but he must have known better than to say it out loud. "You can sleep on the pullout in the den," I said. "Just tonight." He nodded, grateful and cautious. "Thank you." Carla handed him a plate of roasted chicken and grilled squash without ceremony. Deborah and Reggie had left after dessert, but Rhea lingered in the kitchen, pretending to rinse glasses she'd already cleaned. She hadn't said a word to her father yet. I didn't blame her. Dinner was quiet. Not awkward, just filtered. Brent barely touched his food. I didn't ask why. When the dishes were cleared and the house quieted, he sat across from me at the dining table, elbows tucked in, voice small. "I should have stepped in sooner," he said, staring into the grain of the wood like it held answers. "I knew she was pushing things too far. I knew she was using you." I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch long enough to make him squirm. Then I met his eyes. "You didn't just let her humiliate me," I said. "You watched her drag my name through paperwork, through courtrooms, through social media. You let her turn my home into a prop. You let her talk about me like I was disposable." "I know," he whispered. "I didn't know how to fix it. You didn't try." He looked like he might argue, but didn't. Instead, he wiped at his eyes with the back of his sleeve, the same way he did when he was 7 and broke the neighbor's window playing baseball. But this wasn't a broken pain. This was years of rot. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss who we used to be." I exhaled through my nose, slowly. "Then stop being who you are now." I stood and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulling out a manila envelope. Inside were 3 sheets of paper, job leads, local listings, a flyer for a non-profit handyman apprenticeship program Carla's organization sponsored. I placed the envelope in front of him. "This is all I can offer," I said. "A fresh start, no handouts, no room in this house." His hands shook slightly as he picked it up. "What about Kayla?" "You'll need to stop asking that question before you get any answers that matter." He winced, but he nodded. Rhea came out from the hallway then, arms folded tight, eyes soft but unreadable. "Hey," Brent said gently. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She just walked forward and hugged him with both arms, quick and mechanical, like someone fulfilling a promise. "I'm glad you're safe," she whispered. "But we're not the same anymore." Brent pulled back slowly. "I know." She went to her room without another word. I led him to the den and handed him a folded blanket. "Lock clicks at 10. You're out by 7. He gave a soft, tired smile. "Understood." I left him there, sitting alone on the pull-out sofa with his manila envelope and the weight of everything he'd watched fall apart. The next morning, I made coffee and left it on the counter. I didn't wait for him to drink it. I didn't ask where he'd go next. When the door clicked shut behind him at 6:57 a.m., I walked over to the hallway panel, typed in the new passcode, watched the old one vanish. There wasn't anger in the act, just clarity. He'd been granted one night, not a welcome, and not a return, because even forgiveness has a lease, and his had expired with the sunrise. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Baxter, this is Special Agent Denise Caldwell with the Mortgage and Financial Fraud Task Unit. I need to speak with you regarding a recently flagged application. Are you available to verify information?" I straightened in my chair before she finished the sentence. "I am." The fake loan attempt had been filed in Georgia, Atlanta to be exact. New address, new lender, same signature, mine, again. The agent explained that the name Lorraine Baxter had been used to co-sign a property loan on a 2-bedroom condo downtown, with intent to leverage equity through a reverse mortgage pipeline. The application had failed due to a mismatched ID document. I didn't flinch, I just said, "It wasn't me," and opened the folder I kept under the bed, labeled Fraud Round 2. Within an hour, the email was sent. Digital copies of every forged signature, the signature analysis from the first incident, video stills of Kayla bragging on camera about her DIY finance strategy, and notarized records from the court ruling affirming my mental competence. "I'll file a criminal report with the local PD this afternoon," I told the agent. "You'll have everything you need." By Friday, Brent was called in for questioning. He didn't tell me directly. Reggie did. His niece worked admin at the sheriff's department and passed along the detail. Brent sat with investigators for nearly 3 hours. Said he didn't know. Said Kayla handled everything. Said he hadn't even seen the paperwork until they showed it to him in the interview room. Apparently, the sadness in his voice was genuine enough. They cleared him. Officially, anyway. Kayla wasn't so lucky. She was arrested outside a wellness seminar in Midtown Atlanta, wearing a beige jumpsuit and oversized sunglasses, trying to network her way into a panel on brand monetization. Charges: mortgage fraud, attempted identity theft, and obstruction. It made local news. A few of her old followers posted screenshots under the caption, "Guess that vibe didn't manifest." The district attorney's office contacted me 2 days later, requesting a formal victim impact statement. I didn't cry. I didn't dramatize. I wrote it in one sitting with clear paragraphs, factual points, and a single closing line. She didn't just try to steal a house. She tried to rewrite the cost of my name. I sent it in and never looked back. Rhea found out while scrolling her phone during her break at the nonprofit. She came home that evening and handed me her device with the article pulled up. I waited for tears, for panic, for some flood of conflicting emotions. Instead, she said, "Good. Carla asked later if I wanted her to help set Rhea up with a therapist, just in case. I broached it gently, one night over hot cocoa on the porch. "I'm okay," Rhea said. "I don't need someone else to tell me I'm not broken. I already know I'm not." She leaned her head against my shoulder and exhaled. "I'm stronger now, and I know where I come from." She didn't mean geography. She meant me. As for Brent, he didn't disappear, but he didn't linger either. Word got around that he'd started working part-time at a mechanic shop on the east end of town, sweeping floors, organizing inventory, eventually picking up small engine work. Carla drove by once on her way to the farmer's market, said he looked thinner, quieter, but focused. He never called. I never reached out. Some things need time to settle into their own silence, and some silences are earned. That night, as I folded the last of the documents back into their labeled folders and slid them into the safe, I noticed my hand no longer shook the way it used to. Not when I signed, not when I sorted, not even when I remembered. Because power doesn't come from punishment, it comes from finally feeling safe in your own name again. And I was. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon, wedged between a newsletter from the HOA and a coupon booklet for grocery delivery. Pale pink, too thin for anything serious, scented faintly like cheap vanilla and watered-down regret. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from, but I did anyway. The handwriting was unmistakable, rounded, bubbly, a performative neatness that tried too hard. Inside was a folded letter, written in blue ink on floral stationery. A decorative cross was sketched into the corner, as if salvation could be drawn in pen. Carla was at the kitchen island when I started reading aloud. "Dear Lorraine," I began, tone even, unreadable. "I know you have every reason to hate me, but I've been doing a lot of soul-searching, and I realize now how far I strayed from who I was meant to be. I've joined a women's faith circle in Cobb County. I've started journaling. I've found God." Carla snorted and kept chopping bell peppers. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to build something of my own. I thought you were trying to control us. But now I see that you were just trying to keep the family together. I miss Brent. I miss Rhea. I even miss your lemon bars. If you could ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'd be so grateful. Even just a phone call would mean the world." There was no apology. Not really. No admission of guilt, no mention of courtrooms or signatures or the damage she'd done. Just the soft lull of spiritual reinvention, like a snake shedding its skin and pretending it hadn't ever bitten. I folded the letter with clinical precision and placed it on the counter beside Carla's cutting board. "Do I compost it or burn it?" I asked lightly. Carla wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Too toxic for compost." That evening, Rhea came in from her shift at the nonprofit with dust on her jeans and a quiet sense of purpose. I told her about the letter. I didn't embellish. Just handed it over. She read it once. Her expression didn't change. Then she walked to the dining table, pulled out a sheet of paper from my stationery drawer, and wrote 5 lines. No flourish, no emotion. Folded it clean, slid it into a white envelope, and handed it back to me. "Can you send it with yours?" she asked. I glanced down. All it said was, "Your redemption is not my responsibility. Rhea." I nodded. "It'll go in tomorrow's mail." The next morning, I returned to the garden. It was smaller than the one I'd had on Maple Hollow Drive, but it was mine. 4 raised beds along the back fence of my condo complex, each one lined with cedar trim and filled with fresh soil. I planted tomatoes, zucchini, and a row of bell peppers that Carla claimed wouldn't grow this season. I did it anyway. The HOA had planned a senior speaker series that spring, monthly events for the over 50 crowd. Topics ranged from navigating Medicare to downsizing your life with dignity. When they asked me if I'd be willing to contribute a session, I said yes. The title of my talk, How to Divorce Your Daughter-in-Law Legally. Carla nearly choked on her coffee when I told her. "You're joking." I smiled. "Dead serious." The RSVP list went live online that night. By morning, it had hit 132 women. The waitlist was 20 more. I looked at the names. Most were local. A few came from the next county over. Some had signed up anonymously. but all of them, I imagined, had a story like mine, or at least the start of one. And I was ready to tell mine in full. Because closure wasn't quiet. It was a full house. The microphone in the podcast studio was softer than I expected, like speaking into a cotton cloud, not a courtroom. It picked up every breath, every hesitation. The host, a former public radio journalist with kind eyes and a penchant for stories that made you ache and laugh in the same sentence, welcomed me like I was a regular. We talked for an hour. Not just about Kayla or Brent or court filings and fraudulent loans, but about what it feels like to be erased in slow motion, first as a mother, then as a homeowner, and almost as a person. We talked about boundaries that come too late, and how silence is sometimes just the shape of exhaustion. I didn't want revenge, I said, near the end. I wanted my name back. I wanted to stop flinching when I opened my own mailbox. The episode aired on a Monday morning under the title, Signed, Sealed, Betrayed, The Woman Who Took Back the Deed. By Tuesday night, TikTok clips were everywhere. Strangers lip-synced my quotes over indie music. Reddit threads dissected the timeline like a legal drama. One user wrote, "She's like a suburban Batman, but with casseroles and case law." The messages flooded in, from Idaho, from Maine, from women in Arizona trailer parks and New Jersey condos and Nebraska farms, daughters, sisters, grandmothers, widows. Some had been pushed out of their own bedrooms, others forced to co-sign loans for people who barely said thank you. They didn't want money. They wanted to be heard. Carla saw it coming before I did. By Friday, she had registered a domain, designed a landing page, and uploaded a mission statement with barely a keystroke out of place. Across the top, in bold serif font, it read, "House keys, not doorsteps." Beneath it, a resource hub for women over 50 navigating domestic displacement, legal guardianship abuse, and cohabitation coercion. We launched a contact form. We had over 900 submissions in 3 days. Rhea, whose childhood had once been curled under a roof that called itself progressive but punished anyone who asked questions, sat at the breakfast table each morning reviewing new stories. She color-coded them by state, built a database, wrote back. "I didn't know how many versions of you were out there," she said quietly one afternoon, staring at her laptop. "Neither did I told her. Local news caught wind of the podcast and came knocking. They wanted a segment, just 5 minutes, they said. Carla insisted I wear blue. Camera loves it." Deborah dropped off a necklace, silver, simple, dignified. The anchor was a young woman named Jamie with a slight southern lilt and a fierce handshake. She asked good questions. She didn't interrupt. When she asked me what it felt like now, sitting in a home I owned outright, knowing my story had gone viral, I paused before answering. "It feels like I exhaled," I said. "Finally." Brent didn't comment publicly, but one morning, Rhea showed me a text she'd received at midnight. "Tell your grandma I deleted all my accounts. I'm sorry, I mean that." She didn't reply. Some things are best left unsaid. That week, our campaign was invited to speak at 3 senior housing conferences. Carla bought a pair of low heels. I printed new business cards. Rhea built a slide deck titled, "Don't co-sign until you've read this." Every click, every email, every woman who whispered, "This happened to me too," added weight to a movement I never meant to start. But now, it was mine to carry. One afternoon, as I walked through the community garden, sun warm on my shoulders, gloves streaked with soil, I spotted a stranger at the fence. Gray hair, cardigan, cautious eyes. "I heard what you did," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you, for all of us." I didn't cry. I didn't hug her. I just nodded. Because legacy isn't always a name on a plaque. Sometimes it's just the moment a woman realizes she's not alone. And I had made damn sure of that. The contract was thinner than I expected. 8 pages, double-spaced, not a legal tome like the ones that had once threatened to swallow my life whole. But these pages felt different, lighter. Not because they lacked weight, but because this time, the terms were mine. I signed on a Thursday morning, under the warm glow of Carla's sunroom lamp. The publishing imprint was modest, regional. The advance wasn't enough to turn heads, but it came with something far more precious, full editorial control. No rewritten narratives, no softened truth. Beside my signature, in a neater, slightly slanted scrawl, was Ria's, co-author, not ghostwriter. Her name printed just below mine on the jacket mock-up the editor had sent over. Baxter and Baxter, she'd whispered when she saw it, running her fingers over the screen. That has a bite to it. She brought the teen voice, the generational thread. The daughter raised between hashtags and harm. I brought the spine. Together we built a book that wasn't just a memoir. It was a mirror for the women who had written to us, who had whispered their stories into inboxes and midnight forums. Within 5 days of the pre-order announcement, sales climbed, then spiked. Carla claimed it was the podcast momentum. I knew it was the timing. Women were tired of whispering. The local library, where Carla volunteered on weekends and occasionally strong-armed the events coordinator into letting her do something real, hosted the launch. Paperbacks lined the folding tables. Handwritten name tags curled slightly in the humidity. Someone had brought a lemon bar tray with a note that read, "From one survivor to another." I wore navy again, always navy. Ria wore soft green and didn't let go of my hand until the third person came up crying. She signed her name with a flourish and a small heart. I kept mine firm and legible, no mistaking it now. We read a short passage together near the end of the event, not the dramatic parts, just a single scene about moving into Carla's guest house, about the way the bed groaned under my hips, but held finally like something meant to. When I finished, the room was still for a moment. Then they rose, not one by one, but all at once, like some invisible thread had pulled them from their seats. The ovation wasn't loud, but it was long, steady, like rain that had taken years to arrive. Carla cried. Reggie clapped like a man trying not to be obvious. Deborah raised her glass of library punch and mouthed, "Queen." Afterward, during the soft hum of book signing and plate refills, I walked to the donation table we'd set near the exit. Half the proceeds from that night would go to a new fund, micro-grants for single grandmothers facing housing insecurity. Carla had insisted we call it Second Deed. I didn't argue. I was reviewing the ledger when I noticed him. Brent, standing at the back of the room, near the biography shelf, not moving, not waving, just there. He wore a clean shirt, tucked in for the first time in years, hair trimmed close, face gaunt but composed. He looked like a man walking through a museum of a life he used to live. I didn't approach him. I didn't wave. I turned back to the ledger. Ria noticed him next. Her posture shifted, tense for half a second, then she relaxed. She didn't go to him either, just leaned in close and whispered, "He's not here for us to fix. Let him listen." So we let him stand. We signed more books, smiled for more photos. And when I stepped outside that evening, library lights glowing behind me, the air thick with the scent of ink and early summer, I heard footsteps trailing softly down the sidewalk. Brent, still keeping distance, still hoping. I didn't turn around, but I did pause at the edge of the curb, because there's a difference between forgiveness and access. He hadn't earned the latter, but maybe, just maybe, the former could be offered, on the condition he never asked for it outright, and I had a boundary now, not a wall, just a line, and I'd made damn sure it was written in permanent ink. The "for sale" sign had long been pulled, but I still parked across the street, just far enough to be invisible. The house on Maple Hollow looked different now, brighter somehow. A fresh coat of slate blue paint, white shutters that actually matched, new rose bushes by the walkway just starting to bloom. The family moving in had 2 kids, twin boys, maybe 6, who chased each other through the yard like the lawn had never known anything but laughter. Their mother, in jeans and a baseball cap, directed the movers with a clipboard and a ponytail that bounced with each step. The father hoisted a bookshelf inside, careful not to nick the new frame. They didn't know me. They didn't need to. I watched for only 10 minutes, just long enough to see the older of the boys stop at the edge of the porch, gaze up at the front door, and whisper something I couldn't hear. But I understood. Some houses know how to forgive, too. I drove home without a pang. At the condo, Ria had already left for her shift at the nonprofit. Her acceptance letter to Georgia State had arrived in a thick envelope weeks earlier, the kind that carries scholarship forms and dorm checklists. She was going into law, estate law to be exact. "Someone's got to make sure women like you do have to fight alone next time," she said. We hadn't opened the trust file since she signed the enrollment forms, but she knew the numbers. She knew the weight of what I'd set aside for her, not out of guilt, but out of faith. Kayla, meanwhile, had been denied parole. The board cited public interest and national coverage of her case. Turns out, mortgage fraud committed with deliberate identity theft, then turned into a podcast and best-selling memoir, doesn't win much sympathy. The GoFundMe saga alone had made it into a footnote in a state policy reform proposal. "Consequence," Carla had said simply, pouring us both another glass of red. "Took long enough." We still hosted monthly workshops at the local senior center. Estate literacy, title security, digital hygiene. The room filled up every time. Deborah brought snacks. Reggie set up the tech. Rhea dropped in between semesters, sometimes acting as the unofficial bouncer when the back row got rowdy. We called the series Savvy Seniors, Know Your Name, Keep Your Keys. Carla even had tote bags made. One Tuesday morning, a librarian called to say the store was out of stock again. My book had climbed to number 2 on the local nonfiction list, somewhere between a cookbook and a memoir by a retired game warden. I didn't need to be first. Second place still paid for the garden gloves and the good wine. That evening, I sat on the patio, watching the last of the sun ribbon across the concrete. The vines Carla helped me string were starting